Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man dropped on Disney Plus at the end of January, and with it came the usual internet discourse, including everyone's favorite meaningless talking point, is it woke? I don't know, and I don't really care. The trailer didn't get me interested in watching it, and to the people who use woke as a pejorative, it basically means whatever they want it to. Don't believe me? Go back and check the discourse surrounding the Mario movie trailer, and how people freaked out over Princess Peach wearing pants, only to later declare it an anti-woke masterpiece. But the online flinging got me interested in something bigger. I've come to the conclusion that not only is Spider-Man woke, but he's been that way since his inception. To be clear, I'm using the term as defined in modern slang. For a concrete definition, Merriam-Webster defines it as aware of and actively attentive to important societal facts and issues, especially issues of racial and social justice. And, using this definition as my guide, I will only be citing textual evidence from Steve Ditko's original run to support my claim, since many anti-woke comic fans probably wouldn't paint Ditko as someone who wrote woke stories.
Point 1. The nature of superheroism.
By nature of being a superhero, Spider-Man faces social injustice in just about every story, anytime he takes down a criminal regardless of their crimes. Be it a nameless mugger, a superpowered bank robber like Sandman, or a mob boss like the Big Man or Crime Master, he's taking an active part in fighting social injustice. Sure, Ditko Spider-Man wasn't fighting or even commenting on racial issues, but overall, he was very attentive to the social issues affecting his city, and always choosing to step in when he felt he was needed. That, by definition, would make Spider-Man a social justice warrior. Oh no. It's the anti-woke comic fans. They're already knocking on my door, but maybe that's not good enough for you. Maybe that's too broad of an example and you'd like me to be more specific. Well, in that case, let's go back to 1963.
Point 2. Social class commentary.
As early as issue 1 of Amazing Spider-Man, Peter Parker is portrayed as a working-class kid who first attempted to use his powers to earn money to help his Aunt May and Uncle Ben by performing stunts on TV. But, after his beloved uncle is murdered by a criminal he lets escape, he plans to give up his identity as Spider-Man altogether. That is, until he sees May begging their landlord for more time to gather rent money, and eventually pawning her jewelry to make the payments on their house. This makes Peter one of the first mainstream superheroes to struggle under capitalism. Definitely the first to have it as a major recurring theme of the story. Side note, I am not the first person to make this point, and I definitely won't be the last. If you want more in-depth breakdowns of Spider-Man's relationship with capitalism, I'd recommend these two videos by Anthony Gramaglia and Verily Bitti, as well as this article by Jack Elving. Issue 1 also introduces us to J. Jonah Jameson, a wealthy industrialist who uses his position of power and moral authority as a newspaper publisher to slander Spider-Man at every turn and prevent him from influencing the public.
I resent that. Slander is spoken. In print, it's libel.
This in turn prevents Peter from being able to perform on TV for money. We haven't even finished the first issue and already we're introduced to the most common recurring theme of the book. How does a working class kid survive while being undermined by the upper class? Starting in issue 2, Peter begins working as a photographer for Jameson, where he begins selling pictures to the biggest recurring antagonistic force in his life as his only means of making a living, since no one else in town wants to hire a teenager with no work experience. However, Peter being a photographer and not a writer means that Jameson can continue to use his own pictures to stir the public against him, all while underpaying him for his picture's true value. Peter could stop selling pictures to him, but old JJ is the only publisher in town who won't question how he's the only photographer to get pictures of Spider-Man. So, he continues his self-defeating cycle, because it's his only option for a consistent paycheck. Another example of the wealthy abusing the workers comes at the end of issue 4. Jameson arrives at Midtown High and asks Peter if he got photos of the fight between Spider-Man and the Sandman, only for him to state that he did, but hasn't had a chance to develop them yet. Jameson says it'll take the cost of developing the pictures out of his paycheck to make up for it. Dick. Issue 4 also shows Jameson's tirade taking further effect on the public. Spider-Man attempts to stop a group of petty thugs from robbing a jewelry store, only for them to use the public's distrust against him, and press assault charges after he attacks them before the break-in begins. A story making social commentary by portraying its hero as a victim of mistrust and slander from people with greater means than him? Sounds pretty woke to me.
Point 3. Social responsibility.
This may seem an odd choice, but issue 9 features the best dark mirror of what Peter could have become in the form of Electro. Max Dillon was a working class guy who in a 1,000,000 to 1 chance was gifted superpowers like Peter was. However, while Peter learned the importance of power and responsibility, Dillon couldn't see past his own greed. So when he gets electricity powers that could greatly benefit society while still making a living, he instead turns to crime as a get-rich-quick scheme. When Peter unmasks Electro, he even points out that he's never seen him before, really driving home the point that this is what he could have become had he shirked all of his responsibilities. A nobody who sunk his future for petty gains. From this point forward, I want to focus on Spidey's greatest recurring threat throughout Ditko's run, the Green Goblin. Much like Jonah, Norman Osborn is a wealthy industrialist who uses his wealth to manipulate the public. Though unlike him, Osborn uses his wealth and connections to create weapons and gain control over the criminal underworld as the Green Goblin, with no concern for anyone he harms to get his way. Even outside of his goblin persona, we see that Norman is a dangerous man, having used his money and the labor of others to gain a leg up in life. Issue 37 introduces Norman's former business partner, Mendel Strom, whom he blackmailed out of his position in their company and was sent to jail so he could take full control of Oscorp. When Strom comes back for revenge, Norman waits for an opening and kills him with a sniper rifle. Then in issue 38, when Norman feels that Spider-Man is becoming too big of a threat to his plans, he uses his wealth to hire an assassin to take him out. Norman acts as a foil to Peter. He's a man who holds great power but has no sense of responsibility. And instead of using his knowledge and place in society to help people, he's vindictive and allows others to take the fall for his misdeeds. And before anyone tells me that Ditko never intended for Norman to be the Goblin, that rumor has been debunked by Ditko himself. In his self-published essay, The Avenging Mind, he states that he planned on Norman being revealed as a goblin from the start, and left clues by giving him a distinctive hairstyle to stand out in the background, and made him an associate of Jameson to show that he had powerful connections. Ditko also pointed out that he and Stan couldn't have had an argument over the Goblin's identity, since the two of them hadn't been speaking for over a year by the point he left Marvel. While I think I provided sufficient evidence to support my claims, it's still important to examine the opposition. So let's head to the counterpoints.
Counterpoint 1. Ditko's objectivism.
While Ditko used objectivism as a philosophical base, it's difficult to pinpoint exactly when he became fully immersed in it. Having reread the entire Ditko run, there's only one direct reference to Rand in Amazing Spider-Man, with others being tangential at best. Issue 36 introduced a villain called the Looter, a self-proclaimed scientist who stumbles upon superpowers and uses them to rob people. Looters in Randian literature refer to those who seek to benefit from the wealth and labor of others by force. While this might seem like solid evidence against Ditko's Spider-Man being woke, the Looter's motivation of taking his deserved fortune and fame by force is no different than that of Sandman, Electro, Mysterio, or most of the other villains he encounters under Ditko. Also, Rand's definition of a real-life looter is someone who uses welfare or social security, completely different from the colorful gang of bank robbers we see here. I also need to point out another counter to the objectivist Spider-Man argument. In an excellent article by Jack Elving, Ditko and Rand, the objectivist Spider-Man, he points out that issue 10 ends with Jameson musing that his hatred for Spider-Man stems from his jealousy over Spidey's altruism, and that JJ, a successful public figure who only cares about making money, can't allow someone to have a greater moral authority than him. Elving points out that the scene actually attracted negative attention from objectivist readers, with one featured in the letters column. To quote him directly, "The objectivist reader sees the Jameson monologue and wonders why it's critical of Jonah. To me, this indicates that to an objectivist audience, Spider-Man comics would be more sympathetic to Jonah than otherwise. And from what we see of Ditko's run, Jonah remained largely the same crusty curmudgeon and comical buffoon from start to finish. We can apply the same line of reasoning to Norman Osborn. If an objectivist views businessmen like Jonah and Norman as people to be admired, then why did he portray Norman as a cold-blooded killer? Now, to be fair, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the most infamous scene from Ditko's Spider-Man run.
Counterpoint 2. The protest scene.
This now infamous scene from issue 38 shows Peter walking past a group of college protesters. In their own words there, protesting tonight's protest meeting. Flash Thompson, Gwen Stacy, and Harry Osborn mock Peter when they think he's a member of the group, only to chastise them when they see him reject the group's invite. Returning to the above-mentioned article, Elving breaks down the scene as showing this protest as frivolous in content, rather than showing protesting as being frivolous in essence. He also compares the scene to one from Amazing Spider-Man number 68, where Stan Lee, without Ditko's involvement, has Peter refuse to take part in a black student protest, and when the protesters are wrongfully arrested, Stan's dialogue paints this as a good outcome. Peter even states that the protesters will have a chance to cool off while they're held on false charges. I don't bring this comparison up to vilify Stan or John Romita, just to point out that their work isn't placed under the same scrutiny that Ditko's is based on assumptions and preconceived bias. As Elving puts it, Lee and Romita satirized protesting as frivolous in essence, and that this story featured protesting as a main plot point while Ditko's treated it as a one-page gag. If you'd like to read more in depth about how most of the arguments towards Ditko's Peter being an objectivist don't hold any weight, I'd recommend that you read Mr. Elving's article in full. It covers things much deeper than I do here. So, what have we learned today? We've learned that Spider-Man was always woke, and those who complain about wokeness in Spider-Man media, or any comics media, are missing the forest for the trees. Now, I imagine that my take could be controversial to a certain subset of comic fans, so if anyone would like to offer any counterpoints, please write them in the comments below. Oh no, the anti-woke fans are really banging on my door now. Gotta go, bye!